Welcome to the Gospel Wise Author Podcast, the go-to resource for creative Christians like you seeking actionable advice, inspiration, and insight into the modern publishing world. From one independent writer to another, I'm here to empower you to write, publish, and market your books, wielding the pen for the sake of the cross, all for God's glory and your neighbor's gospel good. Again, welcome. Glad you're here. Let's create for Christ together. Hey, creative Christian, Jeremy here with episode 13 of the Gospel Wise Author Podcast, bringing you an episode that might rock your writing, authorly, creative world a bit. If you have not dived down into the rabbit hole of what I would frame as a little discussed aspect that is super crucial to being an author generally, but especially gospel-wise authors who long to make an impact with their work for the glory of God and the gospel good of our neighbor, both now and into the future. With this podcast, I have explored several aspects of what it looks like to be a gospel-wise author, leveraging what I call personas. These four people that we inhabit, or personas that we sort of put on as gospel-wise authors to ensure that our work is both created but also caretaked and connected to the world around us and to the readers who need to explore faith, dive deeper into their relationship with God through Christ, and find just the resources and the encouragement and the transformation they need through stories and studies and other resources. I frame these personas as the Christian. We are Christian creators, first of all, who then create. So we are creators, but also caretakers and connectors. And I want to drill down into this episode, into the creator and caretaker parts of what it means to be a gospel-wise author by looking at what I framed at the beginning, this little talked about aspect of what it means to create and also caretake. And that is the word, another C word, copyright. In this introduction to copyright and what it means to write a book that is copyrighted and to caretake a copyrighted work, I want to give you sort of an overview, give you an awareness of what it is exactly you are creating and publishing when you put on both your writer hat and your publishing hat. Because copyright is the heart of what it is that we create and what it is that we publish, and our responsibilities surrounding copyright are crucial when it comes to both the creative writing side, but also the publishing caretaker side. Like I said, copyright isn't one of those things I think that we talk about or explore in the author community. And yet it's the heart of what we do. Because every time we finish a book, whether it's a story or a study on the Bible or some other resource that helps parents or teenagers or working mothers or stay-at-home dads or gardeners or mechanics or whatever else creatively we create, in essence, what we get to is building this, what we call an intellectual property asset that is copyright. And there is this beautiful illustration around copyright that I've appreciated from sort of one of my mentors through the internet, Dean Wesley Smith. I've referenced him here and elsewhere, somebody who has been a full-time author for 50 years or so, who has gone down the traditional publishing road and is now an independent creator, and has clued me into the importance of copyright and what it means for us as creatives. Before I get to what he has said and how he has framed this important aspect of being a creative and a caretaker, I want to make clear that I am not giving legal advice here, and I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, okay? We're getting into an aspect of intellectual property law that is important to be aware, which is what I'm doing here. I'm bringing an awareness to you about the legal aspects, but also the caretaker and creative aspects of copyright. If you need a lawyer, that's not me. Go hire one to help you caretake your intellectual property if that's what you need, all right? So I preface that. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on television, although I do write legal thrillers at some times. But this is not legal advice. It's an awareness for you to drill down and dial deeper into your very specific and special calling as a gospel-wise author. Okay, that out of the way, Dean Wesley Smith has offered this apt and very, I think, creative illustration about what it means to, again, create but also caretake our work. And he calls it the Magic Bakery. He has a book on the subject, the Magic Bakery, or an introduction to the Magic Bakery. I'll link that into this episode and introduction to the concept of copyright here. But the way he frames it, first of all, is recognizing that as a business owner, we need to fill up our bakery. Think about walking into a bakery or another restaurant or business that is selling something. And in this particular illustration of a bakery, a bake shop, you walk in and there's one pie sitting on the shelf and everything else is empty. How inviting would that feel to walk into that bakery and to see one option there for you to buy, to consume? Or maybe there's a pie, but then a cupcake and then a scone, and that's it. It would be a little weird and feel really off-putting to know that those are your only options. On the one hand, he uses that to encourage writers to fill up their bakery with plenty of different options and products in the form of books. So when we write, we create the pie, right? Or the scone or the cupcake. But we want to have a whole group of pies or scones or cupcakes or cakes or strudels or whatever else that you particularly create as a creative, whether that's stories, again, studies, other resources, devotionals, anything that would delight and entertain, inspire, inform believers and spiritually interested people to drill down deeper into their faith, to grow deeper in Christ, and to glorify God with your work. The encouragement there is to produce, to write a bunch of books that you can then offer to people to delight, entertain, inspire, and inform. With you as an author, when you open up your shop on Amazon or your own direct shop through Shopify or maybe WooCommerce on your own website, you want to have a variety of products, cakes, pies, scones, whatnot, to offer your readers, okay? That's the one side, the sort of the business side of being an author and caretaking your work and caretaking your business, offering your guests, your customers, your readers, a number of book options, all right? That's one side of the illustration. The other side, connected to copyright, is the recognition that when you write a book, you are creating this magical pie that can be sliced and diced in any number of ways. And when you reach into that pie to take out a slice, you can rent or license that slice out to somebody else to enjoy for a little while, or maybe forever, depending how you rent out that slice to a business or to a customer. In the case of electronic books, we're going to take that as an illustration to explore this illustration of the Magic Bakery. And this actually gets a lot of consumers irritated and angry to recognize that they are actually not purchasing an actual electronic book. They're actually just licensing or renting the book for perpetuity, all right? So you're taking that little slice out and lending it to somebody to rent, to hold in their e-reader for a number of years or whatever that license is. Maybe you license out the print rights to your book, your Bible study to a traditional publisher like Crossway or Thomas Nelson or Zondervan or Broadman and Holman or one of the other big Christian publishers or big New York houses. You're taking a little slice out of that pie and renting it or licensing it out to that company to do something with it, to enjoy. In our case, to exploit that right, to print the books, to distribute the books and sell those books to readers. And what's magical about this pie and this bakery, but particularly the pie, is that you can slice and dice it in any number of ways and extract that slice for a moment in time, 7 years, however long the contract on that renting license contract is. And then when that contract is up, it mysteriously and magically returns back to the pie. This is the heart of copyright. When we create a work, we're creating a pie, a piece of property, okay? And that property can be exploited in legal language or licensed out, rented in any number of ways, electronically, in print form, in audio form, movie form, television form, streaming form, broadcast form, audio broadcast form, audio play form, actual like Broadway play form. Okay, you get the idea. There are so many different ways we can slice and dice this pie, this one piece of property, to get our work out into as many hands and in many different ways as possible to delight, entertain our readers, to inform and inspire them towards wholeness in Christ and in their journey and relationship with Christ. Now, let me back up a bit, okay? So that's the illustration, the Magic Bakery. I want to take this in a different direction. And as I have thought about how I think about copyright myself, I have really settled on the property word, which is really what we're creating here. I'll get to that in a minute. But if you think about copyright as property, which it is, it's what we call intellectual property. It's a form of property compared to real property, which connects to another concept, right? Real estate. If you're a homeowner or if you are even renting from an apartment building, that's a physical property, isn't it? Now, if you are renting from an apartment in an apartment complex, you don't own that property. Somebody else owns that property, and they are renting out that lot or that apartment, a studio or the 3-bedroom apartment to you for a limited time. When that contract is up, when that time is up, that right to live in that property will magically return back to the owner of the apartment complex, right? Keep that in mind as we move forward in this illustration I want to give to you. If you own a home like I do, you can see I'm living in mine. You can see some of that in the background here. I'm in my study. Behind me is my living room. I own this property as much as I can with a mortgage and with property taxes. But in simplicity's sake, I own my real property. It's mine. I control it. There are a number of bedrooms and bathrooms and the kitchen, the living room, my study downstairs. I can renovate it. We recently painted the back room there, the living room, a different color from when we purchased it. We can also add rooms. We can divide a space into 2 rooms, or we can tear down a wall to make it a bigger room. We can also add on to this house another room or another level if we want. We could turn the space above our garage into a bedroom. if we wanted to. It's open right now, and we could put in a floor, and we could make that another room. The property's mine, and I can do with it any number of things to benefit me. I could even rent out a part of it if I wanted to a college student, one of the bedrooms, and it's still mine, but for that brief moment, it's going to be lived in and occupied by somebody else until that contract expires, and then magically it returns back into my possession. All right, the illustration from Magic Bakery to Magic, what I'm calling Subdivision, or we could think of it as a neighborhood. The Magic Neighborhood or Magic Subdivision is a way I want you to think about creating and caretaking your intellectual property. The thing, the book, the creative thing you created, whether, again, that's a story or a resource of some sort, you've created property that you have a responsibility to caretake, okay? And the beauty about copyright is that's exactly what it is. I've been using that language of property because that's what copyright is intellectual property. There are several different forms of intellectual property that will probably be familiar to you. If you're in the US, it's actually embedded in our Constitution. We have a constitutional right to this particular property that becomes ours for the sake of benefiting society. Patents are one of those that, of course, go into medicine or other devices, inventions of some sort. Trademark is a form of intellectual property. We won't touch on that in this experience here of walking through copyright and the Magic Subdivision, but that does come into play with our own businesses. If you write a series of books that might have a particular brand to it. I write a thriller series called The Order of Thaddeus. I am trading under that brand, that mark, that series name that can become part of my own intellectual property, because I have now 14 books in that series that is recognizable as mine, okay? But we're gonna drill down into copyright. And copyright is what you create when you write your thing, your creative thing, again, the story or the resource. And I wanna read to you what copyright is from the handbook, literally called the Copyright Handbook, what every reader needs to know. And I would encourage you to buy this handbook, to have it on your desk, to read through it every once in a while, because at the heart of what we do as gospel-wise authors is we create property, magical buildings, okay, structures that we have the opportunity to use for God's glory and for the gospel good of our neighbor. In the same way that that magical pie can be sliced and diced in any number of ways to serve our reader. If you wrote a story, you might want to take out the streaming rights pie and try and license that out to Netflix, right? Now, if you own your house property, you might want to rent out one of your rooms to a Hollywood studio to create a movie, or rent out one of your rooms to Spotify to create an audiobook, or whatever. You'll get the idea that this thing you've created is a property that you can steward and caretake in the same way that you would your own house, okay? Now, this is what copyright is, and listen to this definition. Copyright is a legal device that provides the creator of a work, that's you, of art or literature, or a work that conveys information or ideas, the right to control how the work is used. And this is the beauty, because when we create something, we get to control that property, just like I get to control my house and how it's used and what goes on here. I get to control this property and decide how it is used, okay? If we keep it in our control, which we'll get to, a very important part in this introduction to copyright, okay? The Copyright Act of 1976, the federal law, we're speaking about the United States here, for copyright protection grants authors a bundle of intangible exclusive rights over their work. And here are what those rights are that you have when you create your book. Reproduction rights, the right to make copies of a protected work. So your book, your Bible study, you've got the right to reproduce it in like the print form, okay? You upload the PDF to Amazon or Ingram Sparks, or maybe you connect with a printer in your local city. You've laid out the book, typeset the book, and you've got it in the PDF file that you can give them to print off in a hardback or paperback bound book, printed book. You have the right to do that. Nobody else has the right to do that. When somebody buys that book, they're not buying your copyright. They are buying a block of paper with printed words on it. That's what they own. They do not own your copyright. That is your property. You retain the right to reproduce it, okay? Distribution rights is the same. You have the right to sell or otherwise distribute copies to the public. Now, there's a principle here called first sale doctrine, which was a Supreme Court case which allows the person who buys that block of paper to then sell that block of paper to somebody else. The person who purchases a product, a thing, has the right to then sell it after the fact, okay? But you have on the front end the exclusive right to sell it first, okay? This is why electronic books or even audiobooks or other more electronic forms of your property are actually not sales, but licenses. You're renting them, your reader, the right to basically have that digital file in their e-reader. They don't own it. You own it because you have the right to reproduce and distribute, okay? You also have the right to create adaptations or derivative works, derivative rights. So you have a story and you want to create a play, a stage production, or an audio play, which would be an audio production, or a broadcast television version of your story, or the streaming version of your story, or the movie version of your story. Do you see? Those are five rights that you can rent out, or parts of your building, I should say. Let's put it in that property illustration again. 5 rooms in your house that you can rent out to 5 different companies if you'd like. You can rent out the movie room to Warner Brothers. You can rent out the streaming room to Netflix, or the broadcast room to ABC, or the audio play room to some other corporation. Now, you're going to have to negotiate all those rooms, okay, those aspects of your copyright when you go into these deals, because many of these companies will want to retain their own exclusive access to the rooms in your house that connect to that story, okay? But it's under your control when you create the work to create adaptations or derivatives of that work, okay? The right to prepare new works based on the protected work. That is your right. A different form of the work, or even a different version of the work. Maybe, so I started in my Order of Thaddeus series with Holy Shroud, book number 1. I started with those characters in that sort of story world, and then I created 13 more derived from that original story with that Order of Thaddeus religious order, Christian religious order, and then Sepio, the sort of special ops organization connected to that original work. Now, every single book after that are sort of other properties on my main estate connected to the big house, okay? If you think of it in that term again, property. I have my one property, Holy Shroud, on my estate, my Order of Thaddeus estate, and then I built another house, the 13th Apostle. And then I built another one called Hidden Covenant. And then I built another house called, in my latest work, The Guardian Exchange. So on my Order of Thaddeus sprawling estate in my subdivision, I've got one house with a number of different properties around it, okay? That's the reproduction, or the adaptation, I should say, the derivative work right that you have on your property. And then finally, performance and display rights. The right to perform a protected work, such as a stage play, or to display a work in public. So that previous right to adapt probably really connects more here with the performance when it comes to these other rooms in the house, the property, Netflix, ABC, Warner Brothers, whatever, if you create a story, or even if you create a nonfiction book, maybe a memoir based on your life, you've got the right to create a play or a movie version, a performance of that book that nobody else has the right to do. Even if they buy the physical book, they don't have the right to perform that book before an audience. Only you do. This is the essence of copyright. This is the essence of what we create. And there's a couple things in this introduction I want to make clear before we end. And that is that it's automatically conferred. The beauty of copyright is that you don't have to register it for you to have control of this work. Now, there's a reason to register. Again, this isn't legal advice. This is an awareness, but the Copyright Office, and I think some legal precedents, has required if your copyright is violated by somebody else, they steal your ebook and they sell it, okay, overseas or on these other pirated sites, and you try and sue them for copyright violation. Or they steal your work and put their name on it and say this is their work, and they start selling it under their name. And you're like, no, I own that property. You don't. I'm going to sue you. You then have to register it before you go to court. So if you go to court, my understanding, again, awareness, not advice here legally, is that registration is required to go to court, but not to actually maintain or to receive the rights of your property in the first place. That's granted as first off, when you put that original creative work in a fixed form. That's the requirement for copyright. An original creative work put into a fixed form. In our case, a Word document or an ebook or a printed bound version. And even before you get to the printed version, as long as it's in that Word document, you've got copyright. It's yours. You have the property. Automatically conferred. It's also for the life of the author plus 70 years. You have and retain those rights the length of your life, and then if you do it right, your family can enjoy the rights to that property for another 70 years before it falls off into what we call public domain. That's beginning to happen with a number of books that were produced way back in the 20s when a number of legislative acts were approved by Congress granting certain extensions to copyright before we finally have the legal form in the United States for what copyright confers. But over the years, a number of properties have fallen into public domain because the 70 years are up. So for you, you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor for the length of your life, and then your family, if you put it into an estate and pass it off to your family, can enjoy those rights as well. To bless the world for a couple generations. That's exciting. That's what I love about creating these works, is that we get to not only glorify God for our life and for the next 70 years, but we get to bless our neighbor for the length of our life and the next 70 years. So super cool that this is what we get when we create this property. And again, I want to hit on a few things as we end this introduction here, which I hope is helpful. But it's this recognition at the start that what we create is property. It's not real property, it's intellectual property. You own it, okay? This is yours for you to control if you maintain that control. The control is crucial, especially when it comes to thinking about either independently publishing or looking at publishing with another company, what we call a traditional publisher. When you look at publishing with them, they're going to try and, for a variety of reasons, which I think sometimes are legitimate, but they will want to get control over the rooms of your property. And most contracts are going to require you to release control over your property for the length of copyright, which is your life and 70 years, to that corporation. That's a decision you're going to have to make. And we'll touch on this later, what this means and how this looks to make those decisions. But that's part of what it means to create this property, making decisions and choices for yourself and for that property, for your creative work, what is best for it and for your reader, okay? So control is part of copyright. You get to rent out parts of it. You get to control how you rent it and who you rent it to. Not selling it. We never want to sell our property. When we even sign up with a traditional publisher, we license it to them or license parts of it to them, but we don't sell it. We rent it or license it, okay? Because again, that control is yours and you can divide it up in any number of ways. We talked about some of those ways. Electronic rooms or rights, paperback print, and even if you have print rights to certain companies, some of those rights go to hardback. Some of those rights go to paperback. Some of those go to deluxe editions. Yeah, that's a room you can create in your property that you can rent to somebody else. Same thing for plays and audiobooks and Netflix streaming or movies or television shows, whatever else, whatever you can rent out, you can make that space, that room in your property to rent out to in any number of ways to any number of people. That's the beauty of copyright. You can rent and then you can also renovate. And this is something that I think is important as we move farther in our author journey to recognize that there are times when we need to slab a new coat of paint, like I did on that back room there, because styles change, right? So covers change. The kinds of book covers that worked 5 years ago don't work now. And we need to go back to those properties to do some renovation, to do some weeding, to do some caretaking, to make sure that we keep those properties as maintained as possible and as fresh and presentable to the world as possible. I hope that this introduction in this episode, and I hope that this introduction in general has been super helpful for you. It is a passion of mine as I have gotten to better understand intellectual property and copyright myself for my own author journey, to also share it with other people. And that's what my goal is here, is to help you become the best gospel-wise author you can be and really lean into each of the 4 personas. We got the Christian persona, the connector persona, and in between both of those, the creator and the caretaker. Copyright is crucial for both of those personas. And I hope that you'll continue with this journey with me, diving into copyright and better understanding what it means for you and your life, your business and your creative endeavors, as well as your ministry to readers, to understand what it is that you are creating and how to best use it for God's glory and the gospel good of your neighbor. Thank you for listening to the Gospel Wise Author Podcast. Truly hope you found it empowering and inspiring, equipping you with the insights you need to wield the pen for the sake of the cross. Take your author journey further with handy tools and faith-fueled training to confidently lean into and live out your spirit-led ministry at gospelwiseauthor.com. Episode show notes and a transcript of this episode can be found at crossandpen.com/podcast. And remember, I'm here for you. If I can come alongside you in your unique vocation, reach out at crossandpen.com/contact. Now go, create for Christ.